These difficult times, they could distract you. These difficult times can diminish you, or these difficult times, they can develop you. We ultimately decide, right? And that we always, it's a reminder that we have, this agency, right? We have this responsibility. We're not victims.
AI is a big topic these days. AI is dramatically changing the landscape of the future workforce. It's changing the way people, creativity, right? Like there was just a writer's strike in Hollywood because of the potential for AI for creative output, right? Which is something that was long considered to be exclusively the domain of being human. So a lot of people are potentially going to lose their current jobs due to AI. How can your average person actually use AI to get ahead of everybody else?
I love that. AI, like any other technology, for me, it's not good or bad. It's just if it's useful or not. Fire is a form of technology way back when and still is, but it could cook your food and it could also burn down your home, right? It's just how it's being applied. For me, it's not so much AI. Even though it's machine learning, AI, instead of artificial intelligence, the way I look at it, is more augmented intelligence. And the primary question I asked myself when I was doing the research for this new book was, how do you use AI to enhance HI, human intelligence?
Love that.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people are concerned about potentially losing their value in the marketplace, losing their job to AI. When I think it's really, you're going to lose your job to someone who's utilizing AI, because it's an incredible advantage, right? So I love technology. I just don't want to be dependent on technology. We've talked about in past episodes where, with technology is driving distraction, technology is driving this digital deluge, overload, so much information, digital dementia, the high reliance on technology, where it keeps all the information. So like an external hard drive for your brain, which is very useful. It's very convenient, but it also could be crippling. Just like if you relied on, I know you're big in physical fitness. If you relied on taking a Lyft or an Uber to go 10 blocks instead of walking it, right? If you take an elevator, if you live on the third floor, your office is on the third floor, and you don't take the stairs, you take the elevator, there's a consequence, because we're not getting the physicality out of that. And our brains is like, it's an organ obviously, but it acts like more like a muscle. It's use it or lose it, as you're very well aware. So I'm all for it, using it to accelerate our performance, our productivity, and so on. So ways that I use AI to enhance my intelligence, many different ways. So all the principles in the books, there are first principles in Limitless that teaches you how memory principles, focus principles, principles of accelerated learning. We could utilize AI, let's say you and I were talking about ChatGPT beforehand, something like make a memory palace, which is one of the mnemonic strategies, for what I want to remember, right? Explain to me neuroplasticity as if I am 5 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Something very simple, so it's a great way to accelerate our own learning. We have a podcast, and you've been on multiple times. Sometimes I don't get the book in time, because I don't like to read digital. I'm looking, don't need another excuse to be on a screen. But sometimes, occasionally, I won't get the physical book, and I'll ask, AI to give me a summary of the book, right? Or I'll ask, even preparing for a podcast, we'll do our work and our research, but I'll ask it, what questions has this author or this expert been asked before that would be interesting to this specific audience. For speed reading, it's great because it could be a speed reading coach. It could test your reading speed. It could test your reading comprehension. There's principles in Limitless that talks about active recall, which is the active retrieval of information, right? Memory is 3 parts. You encode information, you store it, and then you retrieve it. So active retrieval is an incredible strategy to deepen those neural connections, and also see how much we know. So it could propose questions from content that we're learning to test our knowledge and how much we actually retained. So information is not just about pushing it in, because I think the human brain doesn't learn best through consumption. It learns better through creation and co-creation. And so, using it to give you questions that, spark your reticular activating system, your RAS, to determine where you're going to set a spotlight to. So as you're reading something, you have pre-questions that say, okay, and there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer. For vocabulary, we use it, with the team also to improve our vocabulary in certain spaces, whether it's science or marketing or business. And also, I didn't rely on it to write this book, but it came up with some really great ideas that sparked ideas for me, and that we could refine and further. Is your team, you yourself, using AI in any
well,
way?
I love how you mentioned using it in regards to like podcast interviews. I've actually used it, in the same way when, for example, if I've had in the past, I'd had like an eye health expert on the show, just using that person as an example. And I wasn't able to receive the book in time for the interview. So I asked ChatGPT, like, what are some questions that a general audience might want to hear asked from an eye health expert?
Right.
And, and it came up with some really great questions in a super, super concise way. We currently also use AI to cut the video version of this podcast.
Very nice.
Which is run by a human being. So I have a fantastic video editor, Michael, who basically is at the helm. So he's got the reins of AI, ultimately sort of overseeing what it does. But it's able to, like, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see our podcast episodes cut in a really dynamic way that no human can compete with. So if you're not embracing these tools, it's easy to see how one could potentially get left behind.
Yeah, you could use it for podcast summaries, to feed it. Even though we have somebody in the room from our team that's amazing writer also as well. Comes up, it could produce potential titles for your podcast also as well.
Yeah.
But my whole thing with it is going back to your brain is a muscle. It's use it or lose it. My thing is not to be dependent on technology. It's nice. I think part of what makes us human, our curiosity, our creativity. It could be an adjunct though. Potential partner of ours, and be supporting, our personal growth and performance.
Yeah. Also, I think going back, the beginning, I referenced these creative tasks that are now being given essentially to AI, ChatGPT, and the like. But I think it's important to remember that it's still being generated from information that already exists, right?
Yeah.
And I think where the human brain excels is that it can create something from nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's hard to fathom a future where that capacity of human intelligence and creativity is replicated.
Yeah, and that's why we double down with when we talk about technology. I think the ultimate technology is what we're born with, right? This 3-pound matter between our ears that doesn't come with an owner's manual. It's not always user friendly. There's no classes necessarily in school on how to be able to use it to the best of its ability. But we upgrade our technology all the time. A lot of people here are using the new iPhone or they upgrade their apps, the computers. But when's the last time we took time to upgrade, this hardware? And so I feel like there's a book called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and he says exactly that, going from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Maybe that's something that AI could do, linearly, but going from 0 to 1, right? We're human beings and, we are creative creatures by nature. And I believe the future belongs to the creators, also as well. So using it as a tool, much like we'd use any tool, in the office or at our home to make life more convenient, enhance our creativity. I'll use it for things like spaced repetition. It's another memory principle that if you learn things and you spread it out, it could set up a schedule. It could help you with your reading list and see what things are, But it's also one of the things I talk about in the book, besides digital distraction, digital deluge, which is the overload, which creates a lot of health issues, information anxiety, higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time. More sleeplessness, digital dementia. I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, right? But we've lost the ability to remember one, or a PIN number, or a passcode, or a seed phrase, or or what we talked about to somebody in our last conversation. So as long as we're not dependent on technology, but the other thing I read about is digital deduction, because now technology is doing the thinking for us with algorithms. It's telling us what we should be eating and things that are being recommended to us, telling us what to think, as opposed to us thinking for ourselves. One of the reasons why I love your content on social media, on your podcasts, is, you go deep, and we'll talk about your brain animal and why that is, like that. But, we've lost the ability sometimes to think, because sometimes, with media and marketing, it just tells us what to think, and we're so overloaded and overwhelmed, or we're eating a poor diet, that we just kind of default and just accept the information that's coming in without any without any kind of critical thinking.
Yeah. Let's talk about these cognitive types. This is really interesting. You offer brain animals.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, in your book. And I took the test before you came in, and I found out that I am essentially a cheetah, but I didn't really do too deep a dive because I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, no pun intended. So what are these different cognitive types, and why do you think they're important to know?
So in the past 32 years as a brain coach, I realized that people learn differently, that it's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart. Right? Some people prefer to learn things visually. Some people like to have conversations and hear it. Some people like to roll up their sleeves and get involved. That's just kind of a simple example. And not everything is for everybody. We are bio-individual, and we all have a primary way that we like to kind of function. Just like we're right-handed doesn't mean we don't use our left hand. But it's like if I asked everybody who's watching or listening right now to write their name with their dominant hand, first and last, they could do it, right? They would do it with certain efficiency, speed, quality, comfort. But if I asked them to switch hands and right below it their name, underneath with their opposite hand, it'd probably take longer. It would feel uncomfortable, and also the quality probably wouldn't be as good. Well, sometimes when we're learning something, sometimes even if something we're interested in, sometimes it could take longer than it usually does, or it feels weird, or the quality is not quite as good because sometimes we're trying to learn it with the opposite hand, right? Or maybe you're interested in this topic and you're at a lecture, and the way the teacher teaches is different than the way you prefer to learn, and you're like two ships in the night, and you pass each other, and there's no connect. You don't even realize the other one is there.
Right.
And so these cognitive types, we've discerned that there are 4. And this is what we've been using with private clients for years. But we talk about all the research in the book, and I pulled from personality types like Myers-Briggs, from multiple intelligence theory, Howard Gardner out of Harvard, lateralization, brain dominance, left and right, learning styles, and so many different sciences and psychologies. And it's a fun quiz. Everybody likes taking like which Game of Thrones character am I, or which school of like Harry Potter would you fall under, that kind of thing. And so we say it, there's a brain code, CODE, and that's an acronym. The C is the cheetah, which you demonstrate. Now the cheetah is, and people could take this quiz, it only takes 4 minutes, it's free, it's nothing to buy, at mybrainanimal.com. And I would love for people to take a screenshot of their animal and post it and tag you and I on it. And then, because it's something people share with their spouse, their family members, because it explains their behavior, their teammates. So the first one, the C in code, is the fast-acting cheetah. Someone like yourself, you adapt very quickly, you implement very quickly, you apply, you thrive in dynamic situations. The O in code is your logical owl, which I think probably be your secondary because of the amount of deep research that you do. So owls love logic, they love data, they love facts and figures, formulas. The D in code are your dolphins, and these are your creatives. These are your creative visionaries. They have great problem-solving skills. They have great pattern recognition also as well. They love solving puzzles, and they usually have a vision of the future that other people can't see. And then finally, the E are your elephants, and the elephants are known as they congregate in tribes. They're very collaborative. Elephants have a remarkable memory, but also elephants, they're very empathetic. So they are the ones that really hold the community together. They're extremely loyal. So if we're going to use like examples in real life, a cheetah could be a Serena Williams, right? Owl could be your Einstein or your Marie Curie, right? A dolphin could be a visionary like Walt Disney, maybe I mentioned Harry Potter, so maybe J.K. Rowling's, and an elephant would be the people that bring communities together. It could be Gandhi, it could be Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, right? And even if you look at popular culture, if you were to take, we were talking about, I know you're a big James Bond fan.
Yeah.
James Bond, if he was to take the test, I would hallucinate, he would be a cheetah.
Interesting.
He thrives in fast-paced environment. It's your intuition. He adapts very quickly in situations. But then M, would be I think, for running, MI6 would be more of a logical owl. Right? Moneypenny, her right, would be more the empath, right? The elephant, if you will. Q, makes all the inventions, would be your creative dolphin,
Huh.
right? So Harry Potter, I would imagine that Harry would be the cheetah, right? Hermione would be the owl, doing all the research, and she very very astute and very studied. Maybe Hagrid would be the elephant, very loyal, friendship, bringing together people and friends. Dumbledore would be the visionary, the dolphin, right? So it gives you an idea, and then also it informs. Like we had our team take it, a couple dozen people, and we noticed that everyone in customer experience was an elephant. And that just makes sense that you would go towards your strengths. You would find your own element based on your strengths and the things that you're not so strong in. My business partner, our CEO, is a creative visionary, and that makes sense to me, right? For me, I am an kind of an owl elephant combo because I appreciate community and relationships. I have a certain level of empathy because of the struggles I had growing up with learning difficulties and my TBI. But I think that makes me a more effective teacher, also as well. Our financial person, CFO, is an owl, and that's who you want in that position. But in the book, we offer different strategies based on your animal brain type, how to read better. Because the cheetah could go through and scan and skim, and they want to go through it. Different note-taking techniques, like maybe creative visionary wants to use a dolphin wants to use a memory palace, right? Or some kind of story method that we teach to help people retain information. Empaths, elephants would learn better, not solo, but social, in collaboration. Maybe they have a learning buddy, or they join a book club, something like that. So when people go to mybrainanimal.com, we give them a full detailed report, just like there's personalized medicine and personalized nutrition. This would be like personalized learning. And so this is how you could best focus. And also, you're not destined. You don't have to keep this brain animal, right? You could use, there's strategies you could also use to improve areas. Like maybe you're going into a new role and you want to double down in empathy and emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication. Certainly that stuff could be learned. Maybe somebody is just so, they're very putting things in action, but they would benefit to taking a breath and be more logical, right? Instead of going just by intuition, they go by more information, and people could train that way. But I like this because it's a fun way in 4 minutes for people. I think people want to have the curiosity to know themselves, and then having the courage to be themselves, self-awareness. That's why people go to therapy, or they meditate, or they journal. So this is a wonderful way to kind of get insight and introspection on how you work.
Yeah. Any opportunity to gain greater insight into one's own inner workings, I think, is really powerful and ultimately empowering. And I think that's why, the love languages, for example, have been so successful. We just had Jaya on the podcast to talk about the erotic blueprint.
Okay.
So like everybody has a different erotic type, and knowing your type empowers you ultimately to have the sex that you deserve in the case of the erotic blueprint,
Right.
But ultimately, I think what's so cool about this is that it kind of speaks to the type of, your learning style. So it enables you then to cater your environment so as best to acquire knowledge and skills.
Yeah, it just makes it, because in school they teach you what to learn and what to think, but not necessarily how to learn and how to think.
Exactly.
Right? And it's kind of assembly line, one size fits all, was created, at that time where assembly lines, it's like you're put in there and batched based on the date of birth. Right, and it's kind of more cookie cutter, and we live in an age of autonomous electric cars, spaceships that are going to Mars, but our vehicle choice often when it comes to learning and performance is more of a horse and buggy, right? So I think the insight informs, what you could do, your routines, your habits, your ongoing behaviors to reach whatever goals that you want. And that's really what Limitless is about. Limitless is not about being perfect. Limitless is about advancing and progressing beyond what you currently believe is possible. The new additions that we have with this book, though, is brand new chapters on really to accelerate momentum. So when we had conversation in a previous episode, and maybe you could link to the, in the show notes, we focused on 3 areas to become limitless, because you control the controllables, right? And there's a quote in Limitless from a French philosopher that says, life is the letter C between B and D. And B stands for birth, D stands for death, obviously. C, choice. Like we are the sum total of all the choices we've made up to this point. What are we going to eat? What are we going to feed our minds? Where are we going to live? Who are we going to spend time with? What are we going to do as career, and so on, right? And I believe that these difficult times, they could distract you. These difficult times can diminish you, or these difficult times, they can develop you. We ultimately decide, right? And that we always, it's just a reminder that we have, this agency, right? We have this responsibility. We're not victims, of our own circumstance. And I think the things that we could choose at any given time are three things: our mindset, our motivation, and the methods we're using, right? So it's like your head, your heart, and your hands, meaning that you control the controllables. Your mindset is the set of assumptions and attitudes you have about something. So like I just came from an event speaking and somebody pulled me aside and like, I'm glad you're here. I know you're a memory expert. And they said, I have a horrible memory. I'm getting too old or whatever, right? And I was like, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Right? Our brains are this incredible supercomputer, and our self-talk, our beliefs, our thoughts are the program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering people's names, you won't remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. So it's interesting if someone has a goal in their head, maybe they want to have this kind of body, or they want to have this kind of relationship, or they want to have this kind of income. The methods are the last things to address because a lot of people know what to do, but they're not doing what they know, right? Because common sense is not common practice,
Exactly.
right? Most of your viewers, most of your listeners have forgotten more about health and how to have a genius life than most of their friends and family will ever learn, right? But putting into action is where it happens. But the methods, like right now, I would imagine there's some area of people's lives where they feel stuck, right? Maybe in their contribution, their income, their health, and their happiness, whatever it is, their reading speed, their memory, whatever. So that box is three-dimensional, right? So by definition, there are three forces that contain that box, and these are the same three forces that will liberate you out of that. And I feel like it's that limitless model. It's your mindset, your motivation, and your methods, because your mindset are the set of assumptions and attitudes you have about something. So things like, let's say they want a better memory, and their assumptions are, my memory is fixed. Genius is just born, right? Which we know it's not true. It's more built, right? But that assumption is going to keep people stuck in that box, and they probably won't follow through using those methods, even if they know what they are. Some people could believe that they're in that box of mindset are things like what I believe is possible, what I believe I'm capable of. Because you could believe Max is capable of doing these remarkable things, but I'm not, right? And that'll keep people stuck in that box. And also what you believe you deserve. I mean, let's talk, like we have this internal thermostat and standards in terms of what we feel like we deserve, in terms of love, in terms of health, in terms of intelligence, in terms of the impact or whatever. So we have to address that. But once you know that's a bottleneck, then you could address it with whatever tools, right? It could be EFT, EMDR, it could be self-hypnosis, whatever, right? But at least you know what's holding you back. But you could have a limitless mindset and still be stuck in that box because you don't have the motivation, right? You're not, you want to have this body, but you can't get yourself to go to the gym. You can't get yourself to eat this specific, way. And, I think motivation is really simple. It's just three things. The formula for limitless motivation for yourself or for your kids, or you want to motivate someone to buy, just three factors. And it's P times E times S3. P times E times S3. Purpose times energy times small, simple steps. And this makes it really easy because you don't have motivation, you do it. One of the first principles of having a limitless mind is taking the nouns in your life and turning them into verbs, because that will transform your life. Meaning we are hypnotized either through marketing or media, that you're broken or you need to be fixed or some kind of thing, or we're the self-hypnosis. We're saying, oh, I'm just a procrastinator, right? I don't have motivation. I don't have energy. I don't have focus. These are not things you have. These are things you do. There's a process for focusing. There's a process for remembering. There's a process for motivating yourself. There's also a process for generating energy.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you think it's something, you wake up and you say, I hope I have some motivation, some energy, some creativity to write today, right? Hope is not an effective strategy. But if you could break it down and say, this is a verb, it's a process, then you get your agency back, you get your sovereignty, and you're at cause, so you could have an effect, right? So motivation, purpose, let's say somebody, here's an example. I saw someone recently on the street where I ran into them and I didn't recognize them. And the backstory is this person was incredibly unhealthy. I mean, just the picture of what you would imagine is unhealthy. And all her friends who were teaching, like all the ways. We sent them to your podcast, to do all these different things and biohacking, everything, and didn't do anything. He took actually some pride in being the way he was, right? And when I saw him, I didn't recognize him because he was fit and he looked younger and he had this glow about him, and he lost all his weight. And I was like, what happened? I'm just curious. And he's like, well, I did this, and this. I'm like, yeah, we've been telling you for like 10 plus years to do all those things. He's like, yeah, but recently I came home from a work trip and my daughter was bawling, crying hysterically, and she had a nightmare that I had died.
Ooh.
And there's more to the story, but that was purpose. So the P times E times S3, the P is purpose. It's not intellectual. We all know we should do these things, right? But if you don't feel it, because we're not logical, right? We're biological. You think about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. We're this chemical feeling soup. And just like how people don't buy logically, they buy emotionally and they justify logically, we have to tap into more of those emotions. So I believe things have to go from your head to your heart to your hands. You could have KPIs or goals inside your head about how you want to be and how fit you are. But if you're not acting with your hands, check in with the second H, which is your heart, because reasons reap results. And then somebody can have limitless purpose and still not take care of themselves, because, or do that. Let's say, I think leaders are readers, right? Like if people ask how I connect, they see pictures of me online with, Oprah or Elon or whoever, we bonded over books, and so you read to succeed. If someone has decades of experience, like yourself, doing the research you've done, you put it into books, and you could sit down in a few days, somebody read your books, they could download decades into days. That's the best thing in the world, right? Because they can learn from your wisdom and experience, your insights, don't have to make the same kind of mistakes. And the challenge is some people just don't read, and so they could have purpose, and even they know the benefits that'll come from it. Maybe they'll make more income or have more peace of mind and make better decisions. But they need the E, which is energy. Like if you had a big processed meal and you're in a food coma, you're not gonna be very motivated to read or go to the gym.
Yeah.
Right. If you have a newborn child and you haven't slept in 3 nights, like me, then you're probably not gonna be very motivated to go to work out. Right. And so you really need to maximize your energy. So everything that people learn from your show, from your books, the best brain foods, right? How to optimize your sleep, how to reduce stress, controlling the energy vampires that steal your energy. So that's energy. So because sometimes exhaustion, leads to cowardness. It just does. When we're tired, we just now don't feel very motivated.
Yeah.
And then finally, somebody can have limitless purpose and energy and still not be motivated. They still procrastinate because they lack S3, which are small, simple steps. Because maybe that goal, they want to have this perfect body, 6-pack abs. Maybe that's too big. And so, or maybe they want to, have 100,000 followers on, or, start with something, they want to make the new biggest, make the next unicorn.
Yeah.
So small, simple steps. And I just want to remind everybody that little by little, a little becomes a lot. So maybe it's not working out at the gym for someone who doesn't doing that. Maybe it's putting on your running shoes. That's a small, simple step. We just had somebody on our podcast, and you did also, you had somebody else also as well, like a biological dentist, talking about the power of oral health to brain health, right?
Yeah.
And simple things like flossing. And if you don't floss or your kids don't floss, maybe that's too big of a jump for a habit. A small, simple step, flossing one tooth, right? Because nobody's going to stop at one tooth, right? And how you find your S3, your small, simple step, is just this question. And everyone could just write this down, because this is something I ask myself every single day when I'm stalling or confused or intimidated or uncertain. And I would say, what is the tiniest action I could take right now that will give me progress towards this goal where I can't fail? What is the tiniest action I could take right now that will give me progress towards this goal where I can't fail? Because little by little, a little becomes a lot, right? Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's way too hard. So that's the formula for motivation. So you don't have to rely on willpower or just, to wake up and feel like I'm not motivated many times. But then I check my purpose. I check my energy levels, and then I check, hey, what's a small, simple step I could take? And then finally, somebody could have limitless mindset and limitless motivation, but they're using old methods for getting healthy, like old, antiquated, research on diet,
Yeah.
right? Or sleep or reading, right? Reading is a great example because when's the last time we took a class called reading? I mean, how old were you?
I mean, I've never taken a class called reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most people, like, it was more in elementary school. Maybe they're 5 or 6 years old,
Yeah.
like a reading class, not a college lit class, but we're still reading the same way we last learned. And the difficulty and demand has increased a lot, but how we read it is the same. So that growing gap creates that information fatigue syndrome.
When you say reading, are you a fan of audiobooks as well?
Yeah. So research shows that when people are tested, when they listen to something as opposed to reading it, that they actually have less comprehension and less retention when they hear it.
Interesting.
But my guess would be the reason why is usually when someone's listening to something, they're doing something else.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
that makes sense.
They're like working out and changing plates, or they're driving, right? So their attention is going somewhere else, or they're cleaning the house. So it's and usually when you're reading, you're not doing any of those things.
Yeah.
Right? You're not driving when you're reading, or doing anything else. So but I am a big fan of audiobooks. I read a lot. Obviously, I'm a big fan of print books as opposed to. I don't need another reason to be on a screen. So I'm trying to do a little as much of a digital detox when I can. But yeah, I love listening on podcasts and audiobooks. It's a wonderful way to download and consume information. You probably listen at higher speeds. Like a
Yeah,
lot of people.
somewhat higher. I think my maximum is 1.2. On a podcast, I can listen at 2x.
Yeah.
But the signal to noise ratio with an audiobook is so high that for me, if I listen at too fast a speed and I miss something,
Yeah.
it's like devastating, and I have to go back and whereas on a podcast you can kind of tune out for a little bit and pick the conversation back up.
Very much so.
Right.
And it really depends also on the material, the density of your material, and also your objective.
Yeah.
Like some things you can listen at faster speed because you're not looking to get every single nuance and detail also as well. But it's interesting, when we talk about speed reading, one of the reasons people read slowly is because they have to say all the words to themselves, right? Something called subvocalization. Sub, like a submarine, means under or inner. Vocal, obviously your speech, your inner speech. So you ever notice when you're reading something, you hear that inner voice inside your head?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's your own voice. Don't pick somebody else's voice inside there. That means if you have to say all the words, you can only read as fast as you could speak. That means your reading speed is limited to your talking speed, not your thinking speed. So people could actually read 2, even 3 times faster. We have the largest accelerated learning platform in the world, teaching speed reading, memory, focus, thinking, and so on. And we have a lot of data because we have students in every country, 195 nations. What we find is actually the fastest readers actually have better comprehension because they have better focus. Because if you're reading really slow, you have this incredible brain, right? But if you're feeding this incredible supercomputer one word at a time, I'm from New York, I can't even speak that slowly. But even when I started, if we were to talk that slowly at that velocity, every single person listening, what would they do? They would think about something else.
Yeah.
They would fall asleep. They would, tune us out. But that's what reading is for most people. They get distracted, they fall asleep, they tune it out, think about other things because they're going so slow. But if you challenge yourself to go a little faster, it's like driving. If you're going around your neighborhood here and you're going 20, 30, 25 miles an hour, you're not really focused on the act of driving because you're going so slow. You could be drinking your coffee, texting, checking your makeup, thinking about the dry cleaning, whatever, 5 different things. But if you're racing cars and taking hairpin turns, you're not focused on anything other than what's in front of you and the act of driving. Same with reading. If you don't give your brain the stimulus it needs, it'll seek entertainment elsewhere in the form of distraction.
Interesting.
And mind wandering. So, and the thing is, we can't talk that fast. We can listen, at higher speed, 1.2, 1.5, 2x maybe, but we can't speak that fast. But the question becomes, do we need to say the words in order to understand them? And the truth is we don't. Like when you're driving around that same neighborhood and you see a stop sign, nobody says to themselves, stop, but they comprehend exactly what that word means. 95% of the words you read on a daily are what they call sight words, words you've seen. You don't have to say New York City in order to understand what New York City is. So those are just poor reading habits we learned as a child. And just like health habits we learned as a child, eating certain cereals or whatever, so it's just about kind of being self-aware of what we're doing to create this kind of effect in our life and just making better choices upstream.
It's super interesting. So you'd say that we should all challenge ourselves to read faster?
I believe reading is to your mind what exercises your body. I think it's one of the most important like brain exercises you could have. Forget all the brain training apps and everything. Is just reading more. For me, I read nonfiction, and more recently, more fiction. It's. I think that reading, and this is kind of a summary, but I think that reading nonfiction you learn through information, but reading fiction you learn through imagination.
Yeah.
And fiction reading has been shown to improve your EQ, your level of empathy, your ability to shift perceptual positions, through narrative and everything, seeing things from other people's point of view. And a lot of fiction has led to real facts. Like a lot of science fiction led to inventions that we have and inspired that also as well. I do, the caveat is I read nonfiction more during the day and fiction at night. I don't read heady books, like on science or business at night, because I don't want to get in my executive brain. For me, I don't know how you spend your day, but there's this cognitive load that we have, right? When you're doing an activity, a certain cognitive web is lit up, right? And it takes a certain amount of brain glucose, blood glucose to be able to energize it. But every time we try to multitask and do different things, we lose time, we make mistakes, we have mental fatigue, right? So generally, I break down my day into three areas of activity. It's never perfect. In the morning, I create. Three C's, because I tend to alliterate. I tend to create first thing in the morning. I don't want any input. I really want output. That works really well for me. In the afternoon, I'll consume, right? So I'll create, which is coming out, consume, bring in, and the consuming, I'll listen to podcasts. I'll do research for my next interview or my next book. And then at night, I do the third C when it comes to my brain, from going creating, consuming, to clearing. Like I really, at night, I want to plan my day, the following day, and just get that out of my head. I want to journal. I want to reflect on what I learned that day, right? But I want to maybe do some, meditation to kind of clear my mind, so then I could go into kind of rest, digest, sleep. And that's kind of how I kind of do it. Now, is that always perfect like that? No, because sometimes I have, things. And then the 4C I would say is communication. I tend to do all my communicating a couple hours in the day when I'm going for a walk, right? So I get my steps in, I get the sun and the fresh air, all the good things. And then I do my calls and those kind of things. But that's generally how I like to do it, so I don't have that kind of drop, at certain points throughout the day.
Yeah. Are you a coffee consumer?
On occasion. I didn't grow up, we drank more tea in my house and in my home. Occasionally I enjoy a good cup of coffee for sure. I'm also very sensitive to it because of, my sleep. I have severe sleep apnea, and we've talked about this, and also I travel. I can be on 3 continents in a week, so jet lag, sleeping in foreign environments. So, coffee is something I consume, not daily, but, every so often. But I can't consume it past about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock.
That's probably smart for everybody.
Yeah.
Pretty much to curtail their caffeine.
And I know some people could have espresso like as a nightcap, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, not me. I mean, I love a decaf espresso at night, but the caffeine, you want to be really careful, especially if you're like a slow metabolizer, which, genetic testing companies like 23andMe can help you figure out. But in your book, you actually talk about nootropics, which is, I feel like, a fairly new area for you to venture into. Yeah,
in 32 years as a brain coach, I've never recommended any kind of supplementation or nootropic, but it's one of the questions we got asked, because the purpose of this new updated version of Limitless, it's vastly expanded, because we talked about 3 M's: mindset, motivation, and methods. But when you do take the friction out of those things, self-sabotage, procrastination, everything, then you have momentum. And we added all these new chapters in the book and new research that will help create even more momentum. So like AI can enhance momentum, right? So that's probably the densest chapter in the new book. Brain types, understanding your brain type and your learning styles, and how you do well and how you think and how you solve problems and how you could communicate and influence people could create more momentum. We do sections on learning agility, just like physical agility. Well, you're fast and flexible, but physically, but I want you to be mentally agile also as well. But we did a lot of research on brain supplements, which I've listened to a number of episodes on Genius Life about that, and also nootropics. So supplements. Well, I mean, I don't know what your favorite brain supplements. For me, it's things like creatine. It's something that I use not just when I work out, but it's just I feel like I get a boost. Especially today, I have 3 keynotes and interviews and everything promoting the new book. DHA, omega 3s. But also the nootropics. Do you take anything besides caffeine for yourself?
Yeah, I
when
like.
you need to perform.
Yeah, I found that low dose nicotine is actually quite beneficial. At least for me. I'm not recommending or endorsing that people go out and
And
start.
how do you consume it? Is it like a spray or a gum or?
I use a lozenge made by a company called Knick-Knack Naturals, and I have zero financial affiliation with the company. I don't actually want to I don't take a commission from people that, go and support them. I think I have a discount code Genius that people might be able to use, or Genius 15 or something like that. I don't know. But the reason why I like them, it's a lozenge. So there's no waste. You don't spit anything out, and it's made using only essential, natural flavors, essential oils, and they don't use artificial sweeteners. So they're xylitol sweetened, and so I take a 3 milligram dose before, not every day, maybe twice a week, if that. But I found that taking it before, for example, if I have to do TV, if I'm going on a Today Show or whatever, or do a big podcast like yours, I find that it boosts my verbal fluency. Yeah. And I'm already somebody who I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on the English language and communicating ideas. I mean, that's what I do for a living, but I do feel like it gives me a little bit of an edge.
Yeah.
And I've never promoted nootropics because I feel very much that there's a conflict of interest, because my passion is brain health and helping people achieve healthier, better brains and prevent neurodegeneration and things like that. And so I've always, I've never had any kind of formal relationship with anybody who creates any kind of nootropic supplement, other than those that I really believe in or that might be found otherwise in food, for example, like choline or something. But yeah, I don't know, nicotine.
Yeah, I would always prefer people get it personally. Is from Whole Foods. Yeah. Instead of a choline supplement, getting it from their eggs or something that's certainly more natural.
Whenever people have always asked me my favorite nootropics, I always say that food. My default answer is food is the best nootropic. When it comes to brain foods, I mean, what are you? Because I know that you're constantly traveling and that you have these sleep issues. There's a lot of pressure on you, right? So what are you doing from a just dietary lifestyle standpoint to optimize your brain?
So for me, a lot of the foods you recommend, so some of my favorite kind of go-tos, I love avocados, I love berries, brain berries, I like to call them. I eat a lot of vegetables. I'm very concerned, with the glucose spikes, the sugar spikes. So I do subscribe to having a little bit of vinegar. We had Glucose Goddess on our podcast. Has she been on your show?
Yeah, she's been on. She's fun.
So I do it, and just for me, I feel different. So I'll do things like have a savory breakfast instead of sweet, like she recommends. But I'm generally pretty attuned to what especially having a child now and molding, a baby, and I just turned 50, so it's kind of a different...
You turned 50?
Yeah, it's a different life cycle for me now.
Wow, I never would have guessed.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you look super young, way young.
So I'm saying that, in terms of food, I'm trying to think about, and I want to talk to you offline about, what you would recommend for infants. He's only 9 months old, so.
Oh, so cool.
But I'm also kind of, I'm looking at it a little different. And that was one of the inspirations for this book, turning 50, and also, originally I wrote the book because of my parents and my grandmother, and I know we have shared, Alzheimer's, in the family, but just to honor their sacrifice, because I feel like our ancestors, their sacrifice and their burden became our blessings, right? And so it was more for that. The new book was more, in this life cycle and having a child, it's really thinking about legacy and wanting the next generation. Our mission is very similar, as yours, is to build better, brighter brains. No brain left behind.
I love that.
Is really the goal. And so, yeah, when it comes to certain foods, I'll go back and I'll do something savory instead of sweet. I do have a little bit of apple cider vinegar, before certain meals if I happen to have it, accessible. I like the idea, which every time I go to a restaurant, because I have to travel on and I have to eat out, but doing 10, 15 minutes of walking, or walking back to my hotel or something like that, I feel just naturally, just anecdotally, I feel like I thrive. In terms of foods, a lot of the foods I love salmon, sardines.
Those are great.
The fatty fishes for the brain. We use olive oil in our house, high quality. That works well. Sometimes cook with some turmeric, which is good. I eat a good amount of red meat, grass fed and finished. Always have, even as a child. And yeah, what are your favorite? What are your favorites nowadays in terms of like what would you eat in a for your brain in a typical day? That's
I mean, I pretty much, you're mirroring my diet pretty closely. I mean, I'm a big fan of grass-fed, grass-finished red meat. I think it's a, people love to argue about for example, the saturated fat content in red meat. And I think there's given the heterogeneity of people's genetic predispositions and the like in the general population, I think that there's an argument to be made for, opting more for leaner cuts, especially when you consider that your average beef consumed today is a product of the factory farm system, and a factory farmed cow is way fattier than, wild game or even just a grass-fed, grass-finished cow. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think like lean grass-fed, grass-finished beef, or even grain-finished beef, I think is a health food, particularly from the standpoint of the brain. I mean, creatine. You mentioned that creatine is one of your favorite nootropics. We just had Darren Kando on the show, who's if you haven't had him on your podcast, he's a great guest. He's a creatine expert. Okay. I was like hunting far and wide for a creatine expert, and he came on and he talked about the fact that creatine under stressful conditions is really beneficial from the standpoint of brain health. That it has anti-inflammatory properties, antioxidant.
Because most people associate it to like
building muscle, things like that. And that's a great thing, actually, because for that reason, for that purpose, it's been found to be very effective over decades of clinical research. And it also has a really robust safety record. So we know how safe it is. It's incredibly safe. Yeah. And now what's starting to come to light are all these cognitive benefits or these brain health benefits, which I think are wonderful. And where do you find creatine naturally in the food supply? It's in red meat, it's in fish.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
It's a big part of our diet. And then I realize also, I just want to presence this, it's not just what we eat, it's how we eat, when we're eating, who we're eating with. All of this has an effect. Just like it's not just what you're reading, it's how you're reading it or how you're learning it, when you're learning it, how you're applying it and everything. So a lot of people, I notice just observing people, sometimes they're eating their meal, but they're also like working at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if that's the best way to get in that kind of parasympathetic rest and digest, in that stress state. I'm not sure how much they're really benefiting and assimilating, when they're in that state, or it's when they're eating, and so mindfulness doesn't have to be, just limited to you meditating. You could bring mindfulness and thoughtfulness into your eating, into your any kind of act, right?
Yeah, and studies show that when people are distracted while they're eating, they tend to consume about 15% more calories.
Yeah.
So I mean, 15% that's not a ton of calories, right? But I mean, you zoom out and you look at population health statistics, and most people are overweight at this point. Either overweight or obese, trending towards 50% of the population being obese,
which could affect your brain.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you have a resistance training regimen currently?
I try to stay fit. Part of it is these sleep apnea. Sometimes for 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, I averaged about 90 minutes a night.
Oof.
Yeah, so it was really life-threatening. I was hospitalized a few times. Part of it, again, I tested my family. My parents have obstructive apnea, and my siblings all have it also as well. So there's that factor. But also because of my head injury when I was 5, I used to really overdo it with studying to try to get level set, keep up with everybody else. So I pull all these all-nighters. So that was not really good in terms of building that as an early age. My career is spent traveling, more than half the year. So different time zones and different foreign sleep environments. So that really created a perfect storm for sleep issues. I use sleep app, CPAP, dental devices, all those things. Nothing really moved the needle. I had an intensive surgery down the street at UCLA where they took out my uvula, my soft palate, my tonsils. Very painful. But my sleep jumped from 90 minutes to 4 hours, which is not a lot, but that's a huge lift. So in terms of working out, yes, I do, depending on how much energy I'm generating for that day. I like to do my workouts in the morning. I'm blessed to have a trainer. I didn't start that way, but we do a lot of, we do weights and we do a lot of mixed martial arts. So I've been doing martial arts my whole life. So, Taekwondo, karate when I was a kid, Aikido through college. And now I'm doing Filipino stick fighting, Thai boxing. But I feel like for exercising your brain, that when you have to put your mind into your muscle and movement, that's something where I thrive. It lights me up also as well. But, you could state all the research in terms of people that use resistance training, and the effects it has on our cognitive performance, also as well.
Yeah, it's just, I think, really beneficial to be strong today and to have robust musculature, which is in many ways sort of like a forgotten or at least underappreciated organ. Yeah. And as a way of helping to manage blood glucose, as a way of helping to foster whole body, like insulin sensitivity, all super important from the standpoint of brain health.
And it's great. Even the physical movement, the primary reason we have a brain, as it evolved, was to control our movement, right? And it's not just a brain body. Obviously, your brain's part of your body, but it's not just a mind body connection. There's a body mind connection, and using our body. We've talked about brain derived neurotropic factors, the BDNF, which is like fertilizer for your brain. All the benefits. Even even when you're doing something, you're listening to a podcast and you're moving, you're doing something like an elliptical, something rhythmic, tends to improve your comprehension, your retention of information. So those of you who are listening to this and working out, you get the benefit of that also as well. We've talked to Dr. Daniel Amen about the power of martial arts or dance for the brain, like ballroom or Latin dance, racket sports, like some people play pickleball.
People love pickleball.
Yeah, and they tell you all about it.
Yeah.
But I grew up doing racket sports also as well, so that's how we kind of stay active. And I love walking. It's something I have to do every single day. It just brings me alive. I feel like it cleans out a lot of cobwebs. I think that I come up with my greatest insights is when I'm kind of moving.
You're lucky you live in New York, because in LA it's really difficult to get those steps in. It's probably my biggest struggle with living in Los Angeles is the fact that it's so not a pedestrian friendly city. I mean, it's getting there slowly, but most days I'm getting like 4,000 or 5,000 steps.
Yeah. I mean, I love going up and running. There's so many great hikings, not too far.
Yeah.
But it's, it just makes me feel alive. Even in the morning, like for me, I used to have a pretty elaborate morning routine, but I've really simplified it. Now I just really focus on the elements, meaning that, way back when, Babylonian times, ancient Greeks, they used to think that everything was made of 4 elements, right? Air, fire, water, and earth. So I just kind of like simplify it. Like when I wake up, the whole idea you want to win the day, you have to win that first hour of the day. And not everybody has, some people have more, they have pets, they have kids, they have, jobs. But for me, I just want to get those elements in my life. It's kind of this, there's this ethos where I'll go outside and I'll go out barefoot and I'll sit on the grass and I get ground, I get earth, right? I get the sunlight, which is so important first thing in the morning to kind of reset my circadian rhythm so I can sleep better that evening. So that's fire for me. I get the fresh air, which is, doing some breathing, which will get me the air. I'll hydrate, in the morning, maybe have some kind of lemon in it or something else or minerals, and that'll be the water. And I'm good to go. And also introduce those same 4 at nighttime. Like I'll have our red lights on or fire on or whatever, and that'll be the fire because I don't, want all the crazy light bulbs that, interrupt my sleep. Do some yoga nidra or some kind of breathing and get my air in, Water is not so much hydrating because I don't want to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, but I'll take a nice warm bath, right? And when I get out, my core body temperature drops, which helps me to get in that rest and melatonin. I mean, when you think about it, our ancestors, hunter gatherers, they would know it would be time to sleep because there'd be a drop in two environmental elements. There'd be a drop in temperature and drop in light. But nowadays, with modern conveniences, temperature is usually set with the thermostat. We could have lights on all the time. So I feel like we really need to. One of the best ways of controlling our habits is really to structure our environment in a way that is supportive of the activity we want to.
Yeah, it's like wandering. It's existing today means essentially perennially navigating the Vegas catacombs where you have no sense of time. You're disconnected from the sun. You're disconnected from nature, right? And the temperature, the ambient outside climate. And yeah, it's caused us all to live in a perpetual state of jet lag, essentially. Yeah. And it's not doing our health any favors. Red light is super interesting. Do you have like red light bulbs in your home?
I do. My wife doesn't really, she thinks it's a little bit weird. I mean, she'll do a lot of the stuff that we do, but
she just goes along.
Right. But we have we have our sauna and we have our kind of our Joovv panels, and I feel, these are the things that, you hear that meds, right? Meds, M is meditation, E is exercise, D is your diet, S is sleep. And then meds RX, R is your relationships. Even when we're going back to food, eating socially is so very important, that bonding. And a lot of families, don't have as much that time or built in, or if they do, they have devices somewhere. So, prioritizing the relationships, because it's not just your neurological networks, it's your social networks. And even when it comes to our behaviors, right? Whether somebody smokes has less to do with your biology and more does your friend's friend smoke, right? Because who we spend time with, are the mirror neurons. We're constantly imitating people's words, their actions, their thoughts, their character, their habits. So we have to be very, diligent in terms of what we're adapting to, right? And then so meds, R is relationship, and the RX, meds RX, is the X is the extras. So that could be all the biohacking stuff.
Yeah.
We have a float tank. We have a hard hyperbaric chamber, and we didn't start with all these different things, but nowadays you have to do what you can and be relentless sometimes, because the environment really pushes us towards that average, that more mediocrity.
Yeah.
And so it takes effort, and we've talked about this, but we choose our hard. Right, being sick is hard, and sometimes being healthy is hard. You just choose your hard. Being broke is hard, and making money is hard, and we choose our hard. Relationships, every area is the same thing. But I think life is difficult because of one of two reasons: either because you're leaving your comfort zone, or because you're staying in your comfort zone, and life gets hard also as well. So going back to the power of choice, we have these choices all the time, and so I think it's important to build grit, resilience, do uncomfortable things. Like even at the hotel I was at down the street, I'm walking all the way down the hall, filling my pillowcase full of ice, coming all the way back. And I grew up in the Northeast, and it's, I hate the cold, but I do it because I want to find some level of comfort in being uncomfortable, and you have that, that you have this kind of, this stress where you could just hormesis.
Yeah.
Hormesis. Yes. And it's so important that you could, I feel like it's, you put yourself, and exercise does that, right? Learning new things, could do that. And so I feel like it's a balance. Sometimes you force things and sometimes you flow, right? Sometimes you struggle and sometimes you surrender to it. I feel like a lot of life is this kind of polarity, this dichotomy where we just constantly have to make choices. And it's not so much about balance. Like balance for me sounds very stressful, like a balanced life. A balance is like equal weights. And I don't want to spend the equal amount of time in the gym as I do work, all these different things. But I really am a big fan of harmony, kind of like an orchestra, right? Not every instrument or person has an equal amount of, time, but so it's not balanced, but they create a symphony, right?
Yeah.
That's there. So I think there's definitely a science and an art for your genius life.
Yeah, you're right. Not every instrument gets the same degree of presence in the mix.
Yeah.
It's really up to the conductor, And that's what separates, I guess, the good conductors from the bad conductors. They know what they're doing.
And we are the conductor and the author of our own lives, right? And we don't know that. But I just want to remind everyone that we are the pilot of our lives, and we're not the passenger. You know what I mean? Going back to, our own sovereignty, our own agency. I think, if I was to go, like, the number one lesson I feel like it is for performance is we are 100% responsible. Like, we are responsible for our lives. And then, I have a secondary belief that everything is figure outable. And it just, it's just kind of what guides me now.
I love it. It is about the C between the B and the D.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.